President, our Democratic leader has just asked three very plain and obvious questions about fossil fuel burning, carbon emissions, and climate change that should be easily answered by every single member of the Senate. And the fact that this is a problem is a clear indication of fossil fuel influence in this body, the regrettable extent of fossil fuel influence in this body. But it was not always this way. Here's a letter that a number of us came to the Senate floor to talk about yesterday. The letter was written December 23rd, 1986. There had been hearings on climate change in the Environment and Public Works Committee, and a bipartisan group of senators wanted some answers, and they wrote this letter to what then existed, an Office of Technology Assistance for the Congress, inquiring about how serious they felt this was and what could be done about it. Senator Stafford, Senator Chafee, Senator Durenberger, and three Democrats. 1986, you could not find a Republican senator to sign this letter today, I do not believe. I got here in 2007, and for that year, in 2008 and 2009, we had multiple bipartisan climate bills being discussed in this body. Over and over again, there was a Democrat and a Republican who got together and worked to try to solve the climate problem. More than a decade ago, we have seen bipartisanship on this issue. We have even seen, in 2009, this New York Times full-page advertisement signed by Donald J. Trump, which said that the science of climate change is scientifically irrefutable. His words, not mine, 2009, which said that if we don't act, there will be catastrophic and irreversible consequences for humanity and our planet. His words, not mine. That was 1986, that was 2007, this was 2009, and then something happened. Citizens United got decided by the Supreme Court. Or to be fair to the Supreme Court, Citizens United got decided by 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court. In my view, the fossil fuel industry asked for that decision, predicted that decision, and they were off like a sprinter at the gun when they got that decision. And from that moment, all that bipartisan activity on climate change here in the Senate ended. And it ended because the fossil fuel industry was allowed to spend unlimited money in politics. They figured out instantly how to spend unlimited dark money in politics. And it is politically obvious that if you can spend unlimited money in politics, you can threaten to spend unlimited money in politics. So between the unlimited spending, the unlimited anonymous dark money spending, and whatever they did in the way of threats and promises, it has been like a heart attack, flatlined here in the Senate since that moment. It is a tragedy. And in fact, if you go back to this letter for a minute, there were 6 signatories. We couldn't get 6 states to come to the floor yesterday because one of these states has 2 Republican senators, and we couldn't get either of them to come to the floor. I don't know what has happened to the Republican Party that they can't take this seriously even now, even as states like Florida are flooding on sunny days, even as states see wildfires they've never seen before, even as farmers are reporting drought and flood conditions that are unprecedented, even as my state looks forward to 5 or 6 feet of sea level rise. And then we got a clue as to what goes on here. This is a letter that was written on behalf of Andrew Wheeler, who is the slightly cleaned up version of Scott Pruitt, who is pending before us to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. It ought to tell us a lot that the Republicans have put up a coal lobbyist to represent the people of America leading the Environmental Protection Agency. But what tells you also a lot is this letter of support for this guy. And who's on it? These are all these phony baloney front group organizations that are funded by the fossil fuel industry who got together to write this letter. Heartland Institute, Koch-affiliated groups gave it at least $7.1 million. $730,000 came from Exxon. Heartland is such a slippery, slimy group that they compared climate scientists to the Unabomber. That's the company that they travel in. The Cornwall Alliance, Secret funding, we don't know, but they're always in this climate denier fringe crowd. The founder doesn't believe in evolution, said that tornadoes are a punishment from God, and that AIDS is a punishment for being gay. Running in great company, guys, with them. FreedomWorks, next, $2.5 million from Koch-affiliated groups, at least $130,000 from the American Petroleum Institute. Competitive Enterprise Institute, next, at least $2 million from Exxon, Koch-affiliated groups, at least $5.2 million. Americans for Prosperity. This is basically the hit squad for the Kochs in politics. It is one of the largest dark money election spenders, more than $70 million since Citizens United on federal elections, a minimum of $12 million that we know of in funding from the Kochs, more than $23 million from the Koch-linked Donors Trust. Donors Trust, by the way, is a big enterprise whose sole purpose is to launder away the identity of big donors so that their money can flow without people knowing who's behind it. Americans for Limited Government, at least $5.6 million from Koch-affiliated groups. Freedom Partners, described as the Koch brothers' secret bank. It has spent more than $55 million in dark money on federal elections since Citizens United received at least $3 million from the Kochs, but as usual, its funders are shrouded in secrecy. Americans for Tax Reform. American Petroleum Institute gave at least $525,000, Koch-affiliated groups at least $330,000, Energy and Environment Legal Institute, at least $500,000 from Koch-affiliated groups, CFACT, at least $580,000 in funding from Exxon, more than $8 million from Koch-linked groups, and then at the bottom, this little Caesar Rodney Institute, which is part of the larger state policy network, which is funded by the Kochs to spread their propaganda and poison into state legislatures. This crew of fossil fuel-funded, climate-denying front groups have received a minimum of more than $63 million from the fossil fuel industry. And this is why we have an Andrew Wheeler, a coal lobbyist, lined up to run our environmental agency in this country. I yield the floor.